The white lace of my vintage gown was dragging through the dirt as the blue and red strobe lights began to dance across the oak trees. My heart didn't just drop. It shattered into a million jagged pieces right there on the altar. How could someone be so heartless as to call the police during the first dance? I looked toward the property line and saw her, Mrs. Gable, standing on her porch with her arms crossed and a smirk that looked like she just won the lottery. The air smelled like expensive jasmine perfume and cheap betrayal. The violinist stopped mid-note, the screech of the bows creating a haunting echo that hung in the humid evening air. I took a deep breath, feeling the silk of my bodice tighten against my ribs, and I whispered to myself that this was not how the story was going to end. Can you believe the audacity? 3 years of planning, a lifetime of dreaming, and a woman who spends her weekends measuring her neighbor's grass height was trying to burn it all down. I felt a sigh ripple through my chest, the heavy, shuddering thing that tasted like salt and anger. The lead officer, a man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on a Saturday night, stepped over the low stone wall and approached the dance floor. His boots crunched on the gravel. Soul-crushing sound that silenced the gasps of my 300 guests. He looked at me, then at the towering floral arch, then at the frantic wedding planner who was hyperventilating into a silk napkin. I saw his hand move toward his belt and I felt my blood turn to ice. Is this really happening? My mother started to cry. A whimpering sound that cut deeper than the sirens. I looked back at Mrs. Gable, who was now literally waving a printed copy of the local noise ordinance over her head like a flag of conquest. She wanted a war. But she had no idea she was trespassing on a battlefield I had spent a decade building. I squeezed my husband's hand, feeling the steady pulse of his thumb against my palm, and I signaled for the music to stay off for just a moment longer. The silence was deafening, filled only with the distant hum of a lawnmower and the heavy, thumping rhythm of my own pulse in my ears. The officer cleared his throat, the sound rasping and mechanical through his body camera. We've had a report of a massive zoning violation and a public nuisance. His voice devoid of empathy. He told us we had 10 minutes to clear the premises or he'd start issuing citations to every guest in attendance. My bridesmaids were whispering, the silk of their dresses rustling like dry leaves in a storm. Mrs. Gable actually shouted from her porch, telling them to lock me up because she was tired of the riffraff ruining the neighborhood. Riffraff? I've lived here since I was 5. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat, a sharp, cynical sound that startled the officer. I asked him if he had checked the deed records for the 3 adjacent lots before he decided to storm a private ceremony. He looked confused, his brow furrowing as he reached for his radio. Why would he check that? He thought this was just another backyard party in a suburban cul-de-sac. He didn't know that the man standing in the tuxedo next to me wasn't just my husband, but the lead developer for the entire district. I reached into the hidden pocket of my dress and pulled out a small, laminated card I'd kept for this exact moment. I knew Mrs. Gable. I knew she'd hated my family since the day we painted our shutters a shade of blue she deemed too oceanic. I whispered to the officer to look at the address on the permit he was holding and then look at the street signs. The air grew thick with the scent of wood smoke from the catering ovens, a warm, savory smell that felt suddenly suffocating. I pointed to the 3 houses surrounding us, the ones she thought were occupied by quiet, elderly couples who didn't exist. I told him very clearly that I didn't just own this house. I owned the entire block, the vacant lot behind it, and the private access road he'd parked his cruiser on. Her eyes went wide when she saw me hand the officer a stack of documents that had been notarized a month ago. The officer's face went from stern to pale in a matter of seconds. He started backing away, his hand dropping from his belt as he realized he was standing on private property that had been legally designated as a temporary event venue with a 24-hour noise waiver. How did she miss that? She was so busy spying through her blinds that she forgot to check the public notices at City Hall. I walked toward the fence line, my veil catching on a rose bush, but I didn't care. I stood right under her porch and looked up at her. Her face was the color of a spoiled tomato, her mouth agape like a landed fish. I asked her if she enjoyed the view, because it was the last one she was going to get from that balcony. My husband stepped up behind me, his voice calm and lethal, reminding her that her own property was currently under review for a historical landmark violation regarding her illegal sunroom. The silence that followed was beautiful. The officer apologized, tipped his cap, and actually told us to turn the music up. The guests erupted into a roar of cheers that drowned out the sound of his retreating engine. As the violinists struck up a triumphant Vivaldi piece, I watched the light go out in Mrs. Gable's house. She had tried to steal a moment of joy, but she ended up losing her standing in the only place she felt powerful. The night ended with the scent of rain and victory, a reminder that those who build their lives on the misery of others will always find themselves living in a house of cards. Justice isn't just a gavel in a courtroom. It's the look on a bully's face when they realize they've finally picked a fight with someone who owns the ground they're standing on. We danced until 4 a.m, the music echoing through the streets I called mine, proving that no amount of bitterness can extinguish a fire fueled by love and preparation. Would you like to see how we handled the lawsuit she tried to file the next morning?